Hello. Can we talk about karma without blaming victims? I'm Allison Batty-Capps of Blossoming Heart Wellness. Have you ever been told that people suffer because of karma from a past life? Or have you heard people say, don't worry, they're going to get what's coming for them in their next life? Maybe you've heard things like, they must have chosen that experience, or they're learning their karmic lesson, or what goes around comes around. Or perhaps you've been told that people who experience abuse, illness, poverty, oppression, or trauma are somehow experiencing the consequences of actions from another lifetime. If so, I'd like to offer you another perspective, one that doesn't require blaming victims to make sense of human suffering, one that bridges spirituality, psychology, and neuroscience with compassion, and one that I hope helps us think more critically and humanely about what karma might actually mean. So here's the problem that I have with some teachings about karma. And again, this is my personal reflection. This is not universal truth. I also want to begin by being very clear. I am not saying that karma is real, and I am not saying that karma isn't real. What I am questioning is a particular interpretation of what karma means. It's an interpretation that suggests if something painful happens to you, you somehow deserved it. Sometimes people imply that maybe it wasn't something you did in this lifetime, it was something you did in a past lifetime. But they imply that you somehow deserve the suffering nonetheless. Sometimes they also say, well, don't worry about what that person is doing and the harm that they're causing, because in the next lifetime, they will be the recipient of that same trauma and justice will be served. And the reason I struggle with this interpretation is that it unintentionally normalizes suffering. It justifies it. It normalizes abuse. It normalizes oppression. It normalizes violence. And it can lead people to stop asking important questions about healing, justice, accountability, and compassion. As a trauma-informed therapist, one of the things that I have learned is that people are remarkably adaptive. The nervous system develops strategies to survive what it experiences. Children who experience abuse adapt. Children who experience neglect adapt. And those adaptations continue long after the original threat is gone. From this perspective, suffering is not evidence of moral failure. It is often evidence of human beings attempting to survive in challenging situations. From a neuroscience perspective, our experiences shape our nervous systems. Repeated experiences influence how the brain develops, how neural pathways form, how emotional responses surface, how attachment patterns get built, how our perceptions of safety are shaped, how our expectations about relationships form. And if someone grows up in an environment that has been filled with fear, criticism, violence, or unpredictability, their nervous system may become organized around survival. That is not punishment. That is adaptation. And if that person later struggles with anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, emotional reactivity, control issues, addiction, violence towards others, I don't believe that it is helpful to tell them that is your karma. Instead, we might ask, what happened to you? What did your nervous system learn? How might these patterns of behaviors and these beliefs be shaped by the wound or the pain? How might they be adaptive to keep you safe? And what supports do you need now to help you shift those patterns that are unhelpful? What if there's a different way to understand karma? What if karma is not cosmic punishment? What if karma is closer to cause and effect, not punishment, not reward, simply consequences? For example, if I repeatedly practice compassion, compassion becomes easier to access. If I repeatedly practice hatred, hatred becomes easier to access. If I repeatedly respond from fear, fear becomes more deeply wired. If I repeatedly respond from awareness and curiosity, those capacities strengthen. This is not mystical. This is neuroscience. Neural pathways strengthen through repetition. Patterns become habits. Habits become identities. Identities become cultures. Cultures become systems. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to shift and change and grow. It means that shaming people and blaming people for where they are at isn't going to actually help them heal or shift and find other ways of existing. So one of the things that I think gets missed in many conversations about karma is that we do not exist in isolation. We live in families, communities, cultures, societies, nations, systems. If a society normalizes violence, that violence affects future generations. If a society normalizes inequality, future generations inherit those consequences. If trauma is passed down from one generation to the next, future generations may carry its effects. That doesn't mean that human beings deserve suffering. It means human beings are interconnected, and somewhere along the line or lineage of humanity, one wound began that led to wounds within humanity that became systemic. This is not because human beings are inherently flawed. This is because our nervous systems and bodies are designed to adapt, and sometimes those trauma adaptations lead us to cause harm. Why I think victim blaming is extremely dangerous. One of my concerns about some of the spiritual teachings out there is that they unintentionally become a form of victim blaming. Imagine telling someone who experienced childhood abuse, you chose this. Imagine telling a child who is undergoing harm, this is your karma. Even if the intention is spiritual or designed to help people to find meaning in their experiences, the impact can be extremely painful and can lead to additional wounds. Because what people often need first is not an explanation, not meaning. They need compassion, safety, support. They need someone willing to sit with the reality of their suffering without trying to justify it. I think this concept of karma is something that we've created to try to help us explain why suffering happens. Personally, I find myself drawn to a very different possibility. A possibility that says human beings are not here to earn worth. We are not here to prove our value. We are not here to suffer in order to deserve love. Perhaps we are here to learn, to grow, to heal, to become more conscious, to become more compassionate. And sometimes that growth can emerge through difficult experiences, but it can also emerge through connection, safety, and compassion. So how do we have accountability without punishment? One thing I do appreciate about karma teachings is the reminder that our actions matter. What we think matters, and it affects how we treat people. The choices we make do ripple out and affect people. But accountability is different than punishment. I don't think people need to suffer in order for accountability to exist. I think accountability can look like awareness, responsibility, repair, learning, and working towards transformation. Those things help individuals and communities reflect, shift systems that cause harm. Perhaps the question isn't, what did this person do to deserve suffering? Perhaps the more compassionate question is, what conditions created this suffering? How might we shift those conditions? And what would support healing now? These questions create space for both responsibility and compassion, for both personal growth and social awareness, for both spirituality and humanity. I don't claim to know what karma is, and I don't claim to know how consciousness operates beyond this life. What I do know is this: A spiritual teaching that reduces compassion deserves careful examination. Any spiritual teaching that increases compassion, accountability, humility, and healing deserves our attention. As in my experience, healing does not happen through shame. Shame is actually what leads to wounds, and wounds can lead to violence. Instead, healing happens through awareness. Healing happens through connection. Healing happens through safety. Healing happens through compassion and the willingness to remain present with what is real. This conversation resonated with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How were you taught to understand karma? And has that understanding helped you heal, or has it made it more difficult? And if you want to go deeper, I do invite you to read my book, The Divine Within, Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, or go to my website, blossomingheartwellness.com, to learn more about online courses or how to work with me, or my upcoming book, Self-Love, sending you deep love and appreciation.